So, good afternoon, everyone. Today we have Ravi with us. Ravi has been actually journeying with Fourth Way Foundation for a long time. Actually, from the inception of Project Nanagushali, Ravi has been there. In short, if you ask me, I will maybe describe Ravi in two simple words: very dedicated and hardworking. And
Embarrass me.
no, Ravi, I'm not embarrassing you. So, thank you, Ravi, for agreeing to share your knowledge with us. And we have majority of the participants today are from Project Venda, and we have a few of their friends also joining in. Okay? So, I'll share your presentation, and then you can start. Yeah.
And come with full screen. Yeah.
Okay, Ravi?
Yeah. Okay, friends. We are going to look at the UNCRC, that is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child. Basically, there are lots of rights for children, but the UNCRC focuses on four important rights, what we call as the child rights. One is the right to survival. The second is the right to development and protection and participation. These four issues are mandatory, are the cornerstone for any child rights discussion. And next, please. Next, yeah. So now coming back to the thing, we are talking about the Child Rights Convention. So I always don't give a lecture. I like to have participation. So now I would like to find out about you. What is a convention? I can't see anybody.
All of them have their cameras off.
Okay. So anyway, coming back to the thing. So what is a convention? In fact, anybody wants to venture? Because you are talking about focusing on Venda, which talks about de-addiction, which is violative of a child rights, which is violative of the Child Rights Convention. So coming back to it, so anybody can venture or hazard a guess. No point in be correct or wrong. So do let me know, what is your idea of a convention?
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a group of people joining together to discuss something or for deciding something else.
Yeah. Normally, a convention is regarded like that, but with regarding to the UN,
convention is something that is the normal thing to do, what usually people do.
Yes, but what we are discussing is now the UN convention. Convention, while we speech in normal regular speeches, convention, he's a conventional guy, because that is a regular thing, that's a normal thing. But when we come and we took look at what is a UN convention, first the points, CC. So a convention is an agreement between countries to obey the same law about specific issue. Now let me amplify it. So there are, for example, there are various countries who will make the United Nations. They comprise the United Nations. But all those countries have certain issues common to all of them. One is the Convention on the Rights of a Child, and then my favorite is the Convention on the Rights of a Persons with Disability, and then another thing is the Convention Against Violence Against Women. So these are international agreements. The next point, international agreements, which will which will which will which mandate, which creates which creates a basis for any framework of any new laws or things like that. So basically, a country will sign the convention, and based on it, they will frame the laws in accordance with that. Next point. So basically, it will motivate the governments to pass laws in their own countries, because United Nations, that's an international forum. But for us, a sovereign country, we have the parliament is our sovereign institution. So any laws passed in our country will have to be passed by the parliament or the legislature. While the United Nations, this convention is a commitment by the country to agree that we will also frame our laws in alignment with the world opinion, which is how the convention is all about. Next point. So basically, there are, with regard to children and women, I said there are three issues, three conventions. One is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child. The other is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. And third is violence against women. There are almost some 9 conventions. We will also give the list when we come to the end. So coming to specifically the Convention on the Rights of a Child, it was adopted in November 1989. The world leaders make a commitment to the world children that the rights of a child is an international agreement, and it has become the most widely accepted human rights treaty. Just for your information, for the information, can you tell me just what is the last country to sign that agreement, to sign that convention? Any ideas? No. That is the United States of America. I specifically take about the United States of America because United States of America has not signed the United Nations Convention. They have also they've signed it only recently, and they've also not signed for the UNCRPD and violence against women. That is basically because they have got their own ideas about how the world should be, and if it is not in alignment with them, with those ideas, they will not be a part of it. So that's what. Now, the UNCRC is a human rights treaty which sets out civil, political, economical, social, health, and cultural rights of children. And the convention defines, how to define a child. A child is any human being under the age of 18, irrespective of gender, race, nation, color, language, religion, origin, wealth, birth, status, or any other status. A child is any human being who is below the age of 18. So, and nations which sign this convention, as per the international law, will have to modify their own laws in alignment with this international convention. So when a country signs a convention, it is a commitment to the world that we will also pass in alignment with the universal laws, universal mandates. As per that, we will also modify the laws in our country. Next point, please. So what is the convention? every right spelled out in the convention is inherent to human dignity and the holistic and the harmonious development of every child, irrespective of, I told you, gender, caste, creed, language, nothing of that sort. Because as a child, whatever they have got certain mandate, and we have got to follow that. And there are four basic principles. They are known as general principles, which found the cornerstone of the principles of the convention. One is non-discrimination. All children have rights, irrespective of their race, color, sex, gender, national, ethnic, or social origin. All children have rights, which is non-discrimination, which is also mentioned in the Article 2 of this convention. Second is, it will always be in the best interest of the child. So basically, if any law, any government passes a law which is not in alignment with the best interest of the child, that becomes null and void, because this convention specifically defines that all laws which can be implemented should be on the best interests of the child. Third one is the right to life, survival, and development. These are paramount. So basically, a child has a right to life, to survive and development, both physically, mentally, spiritually, morally, and psychologically, to their full potential. And ultimately, the last one is the rights to the views of a child. The children have a right to express themselves on matters which affects them. So, so basically, the government cannot make any laws if it is it is going against the interests of the child. So every child has got a right to challenge, if suppose the government passes some rules or some right or something which is violative of the principle. A child can appeal in the court of law and even go to the United Nations. Next point, please. So basically, these four rights: right to survival, right to participation, right to protection, and right to development. And these are also split into, these 4 points are split into various other sub points. So right to survival comprises of right to be born, right to minimum standards of food, shelter, and clothing, right to live with dignity, right to safe care, drinking water, nutritious food, and stay healthy. So these are basically what comprising of right to survival. Now next is right to protection. A child has to be protected from all sorts of violence. This is mandatory. Actually, technically, when we have all this, especially what is happening in the Middle East and all, we see that the children, they bear the brunt of the violence. So that is actually a violation of human rights as well as the child rights. To be protected from neglect, to be protected from sexual and physical abuse. That you will be speaking much, you have got more experience than me. And to be protected from dangerous drugs. So this is the right to protection. Next comes the right to participation. The right to participation comprises of right to have an opinion, have a freedom of opinion, right to have a freedom of expression, right to have a freedom of association, right to have freedom of information, and right to participate in any decision making that involves him or her directly or indirectly. And the right to educate, right to development. Just go behind. Just the previous point. The previous point, CC.
One second.
I look at it. Yeah. So, right to development comprises of right to education, right to learn, right to relax, and right to development, all forms of development, emotional, mental, and physical. Next point, please. So, there are many reasons for singling out child rights as separate human beings because those are principles which are not really written out in this one, but based on it we have the UNCRC. So children are individuals. They have their own thinking process, and they're not neither the possessions of their parents or the state. They are people in the making, and they have equal rights as any citizen, as any member of the human family. And they are but they're totally dependent. That is one thing. Because of the dependency, we adults, what we do, we will discriminate them. We will not let them speak out because so that is what we as adults will have to protect, and we'll have to prevent it. That the actions and the interactions of the government impact children more strongly than any other group in society. So the children, they are very much affected by the what the government or the state does. So so basically, we as child rights activists will have to be processing. We have to take great care to see that their interests or the government will in their action or inaction, sometimes inaction also, will not affect or impact the children also. And the children's voices should be heard and considered in the political process. Next, please. Okay. Many changes in society have disproportionate and some negative impacts. So, for example, transformation of family structure, globalization, migration, because actually we saw that the other day, recently in COVID times and all, people taking their children, walking from South India, Bangalore, Chennai to Delhi and North India, UP, and they will also be having small children, small babies, small children, and this is actually violative of human rights. It is also violative of children's rights. The the healthy development of children is crucial to the well-being of any society, irrespective of what society you are. Until and unless you are not paying attention to the healthy development of the children, you are affecting your social structure itself. So the cause of society failing its children, suppose the society doesn't fulfill its commitment to the children, then it is very huge, because if you don't protect and develop your child resources, you are creating a system where you're paving the right of a social collapse. Next, please. So the history of child rights. Basically, in 1924, before the UN, before the UN came into existence, the League of Nations adopted one Geneva Declaration. And this declaration was the first earliest child rights declaration. I'll also later give it to CC for their historical purposes. It'll also clarify about how it was. Then in 1946, the United Nations sets up the UNICEF, the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. So that becomes the caretaker of the child rights all over the globe. And along with that, because UNICEF is an association, it's an organization which looks after the interests of the children globally, irrespective of which country they are. The UNICEF can look into the interests of the children and advise governments and even courts, and they will also come out with reports and strictures which will also have an impact for the world bodies, for the world countries to consider what is happening. And so, as a part of it, the UN General Assembly, we also passed the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. This is human rights was declared as a fundamental document in 1948, which defined as a human being, we all have certain inalienable rights, and based on that, a lot of rights also flow out. So the United Nations human rights forms the core of existence of a human being. Then in 1959, the United Nations again General Assembly passes the Declaration of the Rights of a Child, which recognize the right to education, play, and supportive environment and healthcare, which are the four basic foundations. These are the four basic foundations. And in 1989, the Convention on the Rights of a Child was passed by the United Nations General Council. Yes, please. Okay. And India, though though it was actually passed by the United Nations in around 1989, India may sign it and ratify. Ratify means it agrees that I will also make the laws in my country in alignment as per this United Nations conventions. But why India signed this convention, CRC, it also had it wasn't agreeing to certain facts, certain topics, certain issues, and one is the child labor. World over, it is considered that if a child is not in school, then he is considered as a child labor. That is the universal declaration of child labor. But in India, we don't pass that. So what do we claim? Children will also help their parents. He will help the parents to work in the fields. He will help the parents by sitting in a shop. He will help his parents just by assisting and helping his parents. So India has not agreed on the child labor, and that is still so that is why we see that though we have got so much children working in shops, in factories, in every other place, we are not bound by that, because we have declared we don't have any problems with that. But the UNCRC also inspired India to also make certain pass certain laws. One was uh, 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 right to protection against children against sexual offences, 2012, Child Marriage Prohibition Act, 2016, and the Right of Free and Compulsory Right to Education Act, 2009. These all act flows out of this UNCRC. And so basically, and so these acts have been passed, and to monitor whether the country is doing all these acts, we have some national commissions. There'll be an all India commission for the protection of child rights. And so this was also passed in 2005. And as a byproduct of that, we also set up the NCPCR, That is the National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights. So this is an all India body. Along with that, we have also got the KCPCR, I mean the state level, Karnataka State Protection of Child Rights. I'm sure you'll also be having a KCPCR in Kerala too, which will also be looking at which will also be monitoring about the laws passed in the state and whether it is aligning with the basically the laws, policies passed in our states, which will also match as per the national programs, which will also tie in with the UNCRC. Next, please. So basically, now coming to the close, there are, as I told you, look at the International Convention, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. These are all UN declaration. They also form of the UN Declaration Treaty. The United Nations Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. Then UNCRC, the Convention on the Rights of a Child. Then the International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Then the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Then the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Then the Convention on the Protection of All Migrant Workers and members of their families, and Convention on the Protection of All Families from Enforced, because the governments will also make disappear certain people. I don't like you, the government will also say off with his head, and they'll also disappear. So basically, we have got all these frameworks which will form a part of the Human Rights Treaty. And as a part of it, as an integral part of it, is the Child Rights Convention. Thank you. Any questions, please?
Thank you, Ravi. Maybe if you'll have any questions or any comments or any thoughts, you can ask Ravi.
I would like,
yes.
Ravi, since the teams are listening in and my vendor team is not very well informed about the UNCRPD, would be nice for you to just, because it's an organizational thing, and would be good for you to just spend 5 minutes on the UNCRPD, how it's changed, what are the kinds of disabilities under it, and how Fourth Wave is working with that as our framework for any intervention with the CWSN. So just spend 5 minutes on that, Ravi. Is it okay?
Okay.
Yeah. We have the time, isn't it?
Yes. Just to add, Ravi, I don't know if both Team Nanagushale and Team Venda is on the call. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Ravi.
good for both.
Yeah.
They have heard it. They can be reiterated.
Yes.
But how cardinal this whole UNCRPD and the convention is for anything that we are working on when it comes to children with disabilities, because they are not sensitized at the vendor side.
Okay.
And culturally, for some reason, no, go ahead. Then they will get what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Now, along with the UNCRC, as I was talking, that the UNCRC is the Convention on the Rights of a Child. Along with this, the United Nations in 2008, it also passed one more convention, which is very, very concerning with Fourth Wave, as Diana mentioned. That is the UNCRPD. That is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Because persons with disability, and specifically children with disability, they form a very, very, very marginalized section of our social system. So in any situation, be it war, be it peace, or any deprivation or anything, the most vulnerable portions are the children, and specifically children with disabilities. So, and we at Fourth Wave, we also believe that a child, any human being has got certain basic inalienable human rights. And one is a right to dignity. And for a right to dignity, what is necessary? Employment, education, livelihood, and education, livelihood, and a right to dignity. These are mandatory for a person with disability and a child with special needs. In fact, a child with special needs is how we define them in India, but in the world level, they are defined as childhood disabilities. And so this is again reinforced because we have also signed the UNCRPD. The UNCRPD came into existence sometime in 2006, and based on it, we also signed the UNCR. We also, and before that, we had one Right to Persons with Disability Act, which was passed in 1996. But post our signing of the UNCRPD, we also had to change our laws. As I keep telling it, I keep reinforcing it. When you sign a convention, you are undertaking a commitment to the world that you will also pass laws in your country which will be aligning with the international convention you make it. And as such, we also declared in we also signed the convention in 2006, and we spent around 10 years debating, because actually uh, 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 we had the Persons with Disability Act 1996. Then we signed the convention in 2008, 2006, and we spent, at least we spent around, when I say we, the disability community, which also includes Fourth Wave, the government, and all various stakeholders, we also spent debating how should the law be framed, because we didn't want to rush into the new law. And so after that, all the discussion, we came out with the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016. And that forms a cornerstone of our intervention in Karnataka. Because for a disabled person, we see that there are some basic fundamental points where he has to be included, he or she. One is inclusion, because as long as they cannot be included, they will all stay out. Another one is participation. Access, inclusion, participation. These three are the core of any programs. And as a part of it, we have got this, our Nanagu Shale program. As you can see that we work with children with disabilities. We work with children with disabilities, ensuring that they are also part of the educational system. And they are also part of the educational system, which will render them a part of the society. Because education per se is not an isolation. Education per se, we believe that that has got to be a part of society. And so for all, so there are two kinds of education. One is the government education. One is, of course, private schools. We'll also have the school for the blind, school for the deaf. I'm sure you'll also be having that in Kerala. But we believe that the government inclusive education model is the best model for education of children with disabilities. As a part of it, we have selected 4 schools, and we are ensuring that these children are a part of the educational system. By extension, they form a part of the society. So we are creating a system and a process, and we also had as a part of this, in fact, during this COVID situation, we also had one all Karnataka seminar where the government, the Disability Commissioner also participated, the SSA also participated, and various NGOs all participated. And we would really, as Dinah said, that we would also look forward, maybe in the future or something, Venda team could also take a look at what we are doing in order to have an understanding, point number one, and also share their experience, because we have got one framework, and you have, when you come with another different framework, you can also give a different perspective. And I think, as Dinah said, that if you can have something, a symbiotic relationship, supplementing each other in the work we do, that'll be very great. That's all. Any questions, you can also ask it further, please. Thank you.
For the team that's listening in Ravi, it's just to give a good picture of how we work. With the Nanugu Shale programs, we are always concerned for the welfare of the children and their education and their equal participation in society. And this this work that we've embarked on is very focused upon mainstreaming them into the regular government schools. Team I want you to know that as a policy, we have people working in the organization who are working towards this agenda and who themselves are people who advocate it, like Ravi. For Ravi to case Ravi is also a person with a disability. Ravi, I'd like you to spend 2-3 minutes just to say about your past, where you were, because it's very inspirational as a personal story. People at Venda have no clue what disability is. They might see different kinds of people in, even on our project, I don't think we are working with children other than autistic children or, children with hyperactivity problems or things like that. They're not actually, it's a very invisible thing out here, because one, either schools are very inclusive and the children are already there. And as a team also, we don't have anybody and we don't know how to behave around each other. Just to give a little brief, I don't want to do it because it's nice to hear from you. I know you've not used that story in a long time, but it would be inspiring because we have a very young group, Ravi. And just to say how you redid the entire thing again, what your journey was, will help everybody who is listening. Would be nice if you can do that, if it's okay.
Okay,
Sorry,
no issues.
This was not planned.
No. I keep telling that to when I go talk in public. No.
Yeah.
So, okay. I was, well, in fact, from my student days, I was passionate about right to education. Since my student days, my college days, and so that was my fundamental belief. Then I joined a publishing company, which was also concerned with education, and so that was my around education and all. Then in 1996, when I was in Bangalore, I had an accident. I was standing at a signal light. A tempo came and rammed against me. And I was sitting behind with my brother-in-law, and he passed away on the spot. And impact was so huge. I mean, it was so this one. I went into a coma. I was almost comatose for almost some 45 days or something like that. In the hospitalized for almost some 3 months. By then, when I get up and I become conscious and all, I see that my company, they write me a nice letter telling me that because you're a marketing person and because right now, since you cannot rejoin, blah, blah, blah. So we will take you back when you get fully well or something like that. So why don't you resign? Which I said, okay, fine. My sister, she said, don't do it. I said, okay, fine. Then, of course, I had to spend some time on rehabilitation. Well, actually, in fact, when I go and I show my case sheet to the doctors, they ask, how are you surviving? I really don't understand that, because as per the records, I had some 18 injuries in my body, and any one of them could have been fatal. That is somehow I survived. After that, I had to undergo a lot of therapies. And primarily, one thing was physiotherapy, and etc., and speech therapy. In fact, people will all ask me, how do you talk well? In fact, compared to my old friends, they will say, Ravi, you talk very, very slow now. Because originally I used to talk with much more speed. Now I don't have that speed. So coming back to that, the company terminated me. That set me thinking. I, with all qualifications and with what's what I do know about what is around me, when I look at that, me, despite being terminated just because I was a person with disability and I will not be functional, capable of working well in that organization, they terminated me. So that set me thinking, what about a child with severe disabilities? Now, disabilities has got 3 levels: mild, moderate, and severe. Mild, moderate, and severe. Severe disabilities are children who cannot also come to school. Mild and moderate, they will of course come in a wheelchair or in a white cane or something like that. But that set me thinking, what about a girl child from the lower caste? In fact, in Karnataka, we have got a very, 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 very strong caste system, and where girls are discriminated very much. A girl child from the lower caste, a disabled girl child. So she's got 3 forms of discrimination. So I was just, in fact, I was actually looking out around. Then I was working for another organization known as Samuha, where I also happened to meet Diana Joseph. Diana and Cici, they were also my friends when we were also before we started, before I joined Fourth Wave. And so that is how we were exchanging notes. I was based in Raichur Koppal, in Koppal, and Diana used to visit those campuses. And we used to interact in the evenings and all. And we shared our thoughts. And that set her thinking. And that is why today, if I'm in Fourth Wave, that set her thinking. So, and after journey, we said that let us do something for children with disabilities from the marginalized communities in the marginalized locations. So we are very specific: marginalized communities, marginalized locations, because basically Bangalore, there are lots of people who do lots of work. We don't want to compete with them. So we focus on specific areas where people are very, very marginalized, and they can also come up in life. And we believe that education is a very, very important tool, and that is what is my mission. And Fourth Wave is also is also part of it. So we are all driving the program together. Over to you, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Ravi. I just want the team to know that I'll just talk in Malayalam a bit. My other team is also following. ಇವಾಗ 3 ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ರವಿ ಇವಾಗ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸರಳವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅವರು ಡಿಸಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಟೀಮಿಗೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ರವಿ ಸಮ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ರವಿಗೊಂದು half an hour ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಡಿಸಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಏನು, ಹೇಗ್ ಟರ್ನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಟು ಮೈ ಟೀಮ್ ಇನ್ ಕೇರಳ, Ravi has been a very he's made it a little simple for you to understand his complexities of how he's come out of this accident, and how his then famous publishing, I like to use the name of the company. He was working with Tata McGraw-Hill, which is one of the most biggest publishers we knew in those days. And if a company like that terminates an employee, those days we didn't know the rights, and I'm sure his sister was right in saying don't do it, but it's okay, everything leads to something. So Ravi, if you my team has, some of you have seen Ravi, the right hand and right leg is a physical thing that you can see about Ravi, and he uses a cane, what do you call it, cane to walk around? I've never asked you all these things.
A walker to walk around. Actually, technically, the term that's known as a quadrupod. That's the technical term.
Yeah, he uses one of those quadrupods to walk along. He's got a prosthesis on his right leg, isn't it, Ravi? Yeah. So these are things I'd like them to, below the knee. So as much as and it's one of those beautiful things to have Ravi at our meetings, and like Ravi said, my journey with the disability actually began because of a person like Ravi. We used to sit in the evenings and discuss these complexities about these children and education and all of that. And one of the earliest influencers also has been Ravi, and I dearly credit you for Nanugu Shale's journey, Ravi. I know we don't do it as a team enough because we're a team and we're on the journey, but I am taking this opportunity for setting that vision in pace, and also being the arm for Nanugu Shale, being represented at various government meetings, at various disability meetings. I don't do it. Team na manasilakanana. Orotharu vanna oru karyangal angotte etteduthu nadakkunna oru organization ആണ്. And it's so beautiful that right now we are going through an assessment, and I see how all these pieces fit in. So thank you, Ravi. Thanks for the time on this. Team Nandil Dengila, he will answer. My team from Nanugu Shale has always the time with Ravi. So there, nimgela amelu mathadbodu Ravi ಬಗ್ಗೆ. Anybody else, Shalini or anybody wants to ask something, Ravi is available.
Questions? Hello, Ravi. This is Shalini here from Venda. Ravi, it's just to get an understanding. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'd like to see whom I'm talking to.
Okay, sorry. It's taking time. Okay.
Yeah. No issues. Yeah.
Ravi, my question is, for me to get a better understanding of how this mainstreaming works, I would like to cite an example. See, I want to so that I will communicate better. I have a associate, very close associate, whose son is autistic.
Okay.
So as per government schools in Kerala, it's inclusive, as in they all go to the same. That is the norm. For till class, I think till class 6, he's actually 2 years older, but he was in class 6. He was put in class 6. So till around class 6 or 6 or 7. So that is probably the appropriate age for class 6 is 11, but he was 13. Okay, but he was autistic. My question here is, though he was promoted to each of these classes, the parent felt that the child wasn't learning much. He was just there. He was a participant there, but not been he was not being recognized, or he was not being able to, because of his disability, to be active participant in the class. So the parent removed him and put him in a special school where his skill development was happening, and he was able to bring out his best. Now he's singing, he's dancing, and he feels part of the group or whatever. So for this parent, her experience was, it was better for her to take him from the mainstream and put him in the uh, special school. So is it because there was some gap that was, I mean, I would like to understand this from your,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. There are special schools, specifically, as you said, for autistic children. And in fact, actually, originally, for your information, as per the Persons with Disability Act, as per the Persons with Disability Act, autism was not recognized as a disability.
okay, okay.
But as per the Rights of Persons with Disability Act, it is also considered to be, because we had around 7 disabilities, and now we have got 21 disabilities. And of the 21 disabilities, autism is one, point number one. Okay. Uh, 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 well, I do agree with you that uh, uh, autistic children and with multiple disabilities and all, they do have a problem. Okay. The government system, I'm just talking about the system per se. If, because basically the government system as such, as today, I do not know about how in Kerala, but overall in Karnataka and all, it is because basically they are trained, the teachers are trained, they are trained for handling autism. But as a system, how do you teach a child with autism? In a regular school, the government doesn't have any
Solutions.
systemic intervention programs.
Okay.
There are, especially in cities, there are special schools, and I will, and so we as in the people with working with the disability sector, we will not stop them, because we are very clear that a person with this a child with autistic or something, he needs some special training, because autism is not a generic training. You'll have to interact, observe the child. You'll have to observe the child and build upon his strengths. It is a complicated and complex effort. So as such, our system right now is not equipped to handle it. So what we at Fourth Wave are trying to do is, we at the systemic level, we are trying to ensure that a child with disability, it could be ASD, autism spectrum disorder, or cerebral palsy, or so he forms a part of the educational system. From point number one. Point number two, and there are certain systems in government schools which cannot handle it, because so we are very clear about that. What are we doing now? We would like them, because basically, as I told you, there are mild and moderate. There are children mild, moderate, and severe. These 3 categories of disability are there. Mild and moderate can also be included back into school, enrolled back into school. The severe children, they are also what they are known as, they are also basically, they cannot come to school also. They come once a week, and they are also called as, what we also call them as home-based education, home-based children. So in Fourth Wave, we have got 20, we work in a government school. 25 children will be from a regular disabled, and 25 are the home-based children. So for them, what do we teach? We teach them social skills, living skills, social skills. Our teachers who are there, they'll also teach them that. Washing their teeth, brushing their teeth, washing their face, eating food. Because these children need some special and specific like that. Autism and various other, these people need some specialized training. We are not, Fourth Wave would like to do that, but as our program, we would like to see that he goes into a regular school, into a special school, where he can join the educational system. So we would not want to replace replace a special schools.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to
To add on to what Ravi is saying, Shalini,
yeah.
the policies, the laws, the acts in place are to ensure that the vulnerable, the marginalized are not ignored or left behind.
Yeah.
While there is always an advantage for a child who can afford to get these systemic support, learning supports, it is only a percentage of the niche who can afford to give that to their children. What has happened in this whole special education space is only the children with these who can afford it have landed in these special schools, while the masses have been left behind with the same complications. So if it is a child that you're talking about and the parents have sensed that the learning is delayed or he would have benefited from a special schooling, great, because there are only very few specialists who can actually deal this and bring results. And they are all catering to children who can afford it right now. And the other part of the CBSE or the state syllabus, all moving children class to class without assessment or exams today, is also another factor for and not allowing discrimination
to it.
Yeah. So policy wise, when acts are put in place, it is more to ensure that children don't fall through the cracks. There's less discrimination. Children who are marginalized are also getting an equal opportunity, all of that. As a stand, the fourth wave, we never advocate anything against special schooling. That is for a niche who can afford it, who can go, definitely will make great strides in being getting that extra support. But there is also another angle of these children who always get this extra support, find it very difficult to be in a normalized environment because they've always been treated special. This is the only argument point where we have a challenge. Because this boy, bring him back to the school again, the boy who had gone easily till 6th standard, 7th standard with his peers will find it very difficult to amalgamate back into that system again, unless he's trained in that special school to socialize and be in a normal environment. So that's it's a very good question.
That's the gap you're trying to fill.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
What we're advocating.
Because the child I'm talking about belongs to the marginalized, and luckily in Kerala, few districts have
support system.
So like mission-run facilities. Like this child is very marginalized. He's going to a mission-run facility, and it is provided free. And there are also, I'm told, there is no centers by the government, but there are these monthly
stipend they receive for support. Yes.
Stipend, they have some kind of a team that calls them every month for a certain orientation and a class.
Yeah, they're called resource workers. Yes.
Something like that. So there is no regular. I think that is probably the issue in the policy in Kerala. They don't have something regular to monitor, so they have just this once a month intervention, or I think once in 2 months, not even once a month, and that too in some districts it's not very regular, depending on the number of people.
It depends on so much factors. Depends on the budget. Depends on the driver and the workers.
So I just wanted to understand the gap and what we are trying to fill.
We also do have the same gap, but the numbers are so huge that something is better than nothing.
Yes.
Something is better than nothing. We don't give a solution, but something is better than nothing. That's what I can define it.
Any
Good
other
for
thoughts,
us.
questions? Darshan.
Darshan from Enda.
Yes, please.
So I actually had two questions. One is that, keeping in light whatever is happening in our country recently, UNCRC protect, let's say in international context, if there are refugees coming in, let's say there are Sri Lankan, I live in a place where there are a lot of Sri Lankan refugees. So when it comes to children, like how much is our government obligated to protect them? That is one. And second, even in an Indian context, it's usually the state government which implements the right to education, education for children and everything. So in that case, how much is a state government obligated to do the same for migrant, let's say a child from different state is studying in Kerala?
Okay.
That's the first question.
Yeah.
And second is that there is a huge distinction between education and school.
Okay.
So now that people have started speaking of schooling and unschooling and different process where a child doesn't necessarily have to go to school, what is UNCRC's take on that? Like a child getting educated or in the neighborhood instead of going to a common space.
Okay. The first question, what is it? Come again, please.
I'll take it, Ravi.
He was
talking
please.
about migrant laborers and their access to education. Suppose it's a migrant worker in Kerala. How do those children? So by the rule of the land, or the rule of law, the RTE is enforced. That is the right to education, and all children have a right to study in their local government schools. Now, for a migrant child, the child is definitely not going to be denied on any grounds, because if they can prove that they are in the locality staying in a vicinity of 25 kilometers, the child, or 5 kilometers is what the government says, the child belongs in the local government school. So they cannot discriminate a child on any grounds for the right, because RT is enforced these days. And private schools don't follow it to a lot of extent. That is manipulated. There are a lot of movies around it. What is that Hindi movie that was? English? What is it? There's a beautiful English medium, Irfan Khan's movie.
I haven't seen it.
It's a beautiful movie. So you'll know how those seats are manipulated and how it works in a private school. But to answer your question in specific, no child can be denied the right to be enrolled in a local government school, despite his location or nationality, if he can prove that he has been a resident in the area and has a local address.
Yes.
And in fact, actually, the government, in fact, Basu also handled one rehabilitation courses for all these migrant workers, children also. They also have some short-term courses, if I am not mistaken, 1 month or something, for them to go back into the mainstream schools. So a refresher sort of a course is being carried on. But that is also depending on how good are the education officers in that location serious about the issue. That is also very much in.
Just to make a comparison with a very developed country like Sweden, it will be so shocking for us Indians to digest the fact that in a school of 1,000 children, if there was one child who was a Malayali, who was who immigrated into Sweden or is transient in just a work, come on a work visa and has a child there. So the state has a responsibility to even take care of the child's local language needs. So they are obligated by the rule of the land to find a person who can speak Malayalam and teach this one child in that school. The kind of investment people make to accommodate the rights to education is immense, and there are a lot of countries that we have to learn from. For us, it's a far dream, but I hope we and the other thing is, he asked another sub question, what does the country stand on these immigrants? And that I think it clearly states that if the family enters India through whichever border, and if there is a child in the family, that means the family has a child, we are obligated as a nation to provide transient for 3 months or a month. There's a law like that, during which the child should also be in the school.
Yes.
I don't know how much of it is, but this is all in paper. It is all in the act, but I don't know how much of it is actually practically happening on ground.
Because actually, especially in the northeast, because there are lots of people who come from Bangladesh and all. So that is a very, very sensitive issue. But as what Diana said, that as per the UN mandate, we are duty bound to do that. But local politics, now they say, Hindu aega to aane do. Muslims and Christians, they're not agreeable. So there are some government policies like that. So that is this one. But as a UNCRC, a child has got an education, right to education, and whatever he is, wherever he is, the government is duty bound to provide him that.
To answer the second bit, the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, that is the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan today, is a byproduct of India being the signatory to the UNCRC. Which meant that we committed in a decade, that is in 10 years, we will have all our children, at least 98% of our population going to schools. And how do we do it? By ensuring free and compulsory and free education. So the
food and all, that's why we want
the whole midday meal scheme, all of that is to enable our being the signatory, because we have to give reports about our right to CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Children, and one of those things is the right to education. And for that, we started the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which ensured RT is enforced, and the midday meal scheme, all of that. So you know, in the last 10-15 years, if things have happened, and we have been able to ensure that at least 90% of our children are enrolled in school. Forget going to school. It is because we are signatories. The other thing was unschooling the whole subject of having this new thought process. It's not new actually. We have had our open schools under the trees always. We have been gurukuling our children for ages. It's only now that the schools are being enforced. It's all coming from the conventions that we've signed. So nothing stops us from giving education to the child away from a local school. But in what will happen over time is that in the name of unschooling or homeschooling, there will be dropouts from a regular schooling system, which if it is in the marginalized segment, that is the poor, the village, the rural, then it is that is clearly those are children who are out of school and will never come back to mainstream, at least in the education space. So while we advocate all this, we always have to remember those 30% of the population of this country who cannot afford basic rights, and those children are always to be kept in the forefront while we design any of these programs and thought processes. I hope we touched upon it, but Darshan, we can have a lot of discussions around it and get people who can give you the big picture while actually ensuring children don't fall through these programs, and just because they are vulnerable or marginalized. Yes.
Anyone else?
110.
Yeah, hi, my name is Shobha. Can I ask a question?
Hey,
yes,
you're
Shobha.
online.
Hi, Shobha.
Hi.
Yes, Shobha.
Okay. So actually, Ravi, you mentioned the UNCRPD came into being in 2006, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure when India signed this. So I just wanted to know, in the Indian context, if
we were one of the fifth or
first
something
signatories, one of the first few
earliest signatories.
Okay. So in that context, so automatically does that includes includes inclusion and participation. So which means for schools as well. So how are the government schools equipped in terms of, since this is part of the, has any law been passed to ensure that government schools have a trained set of teachers who take care of these students with special needs? Or
Okay, I'll explain. Basically, we have two laws. One is, because we are signed to two conventions, I spoke. One is the UNCRC, which talks about the right to education. we've also signed the UNCRPD, which talks about the PWD Act. And with regard to the Right to Education Act, 2000, 2000, I forget. That is very clear, because they, for children with special disabilities, they say that we will recommend only what is being recommended in the Right to PWD Act, RPWD Act. So basically, they don't want to have a conflict. So the Right to Education Act will also agree that the Right to Persons with Disabilities Act, that is paramount with regard to the education of children with special needs. So they don't have a separate different programs for the right to education with regard to children with special needs. Point number one. Point number two. So basically, as per the norms, the government schools, the government has to provide education for all children. That is the mandate of the government school. Irrespective of how capable a child is, how disabled a child is, that is not what the government is, that's not what the law says. So that law says, declares it very clearly, unambiguously, that this child has got a right to education, and the government, it is the government's duty, both the, and of course the central government says, and the state government will also make, because we have an All India Act. The Right to Education Act is also an All India. The RP, the Right to Persons with Disability, that's an All India Act. And there we have also got, which is an All India Act, the rules have to be framed. For example, in Karnataka, how do you train, what will be the rules for a child with disability as per what norms he is? So the Right to Education Act will be a very, very, very broad based thing, but specifically the state governments, they will have the rules, they'll make the rules. So they'll make it somewhat, they'll make it high. In Karnataka, we will have this kind of a rule. In Kerala, that may also differ. But as per the UNCRPD, which is UNCRPD and which is UNCRC, which are also, so that is the basis on which we have also framed the RPD as well as the RT Act. We'll have to frame the rules, and the rules will have to be based on the local situations. So depending on the local government, the local participation, and the local consciousness of the people, the proactive them, that based on that, that rules can be implemented. Otherwise, nothing will go ahead. Am I clear?
Yeah. To add to it, Shobha.
Yeah.
In specific, under the UNCRPD, it clearly states that every school should have a special room, a special teacher, ramps, a special toilet, and all of that is enlisted. So that is what is enshrined in the UNCRPD when it comes to accommodation of children in regular government schools.
Okay.
Okay, these are called accommodations for children. Accommodation is what we make so that a child is easily able to be in that school, learn and pass out.
Okay.
And what has happened, exactly what Ravi says, is the reason for non-enforcement as well. So a state like Karnataka doesn't have the funds for particular XYZ on that list. And year by year we will go and improve, and so first 3 years we'll do the ramps, next 3 years we'll do the toilet. So it's going phase by phase, and the special teacher in every school is the last leg. And right now Karnataka is in that phase where they're now concentrating on getting special teachers. So it's taken us 15 years, technically 15 years, to get to a point where now we are recruiting teachers. We have a mandate, and part of that mandate is also given to Fourth Way Foundation to train these teachers to understand what is real inclusion, how inclusion happens and how reverse inclusion happens and all that. So it's a journey that a country like India, which was considered whatever, third world for the last, it's only in the last 10 years that we are not falling into that category, estimate this journey. So it is good to read the UNCRC, and that is the core for which children will get rights. On top of that is this icing, which is the UNCRPD. Where there is a subsection which clearly says, that's what Ravi was trying to explain, clearly mandates education and what it needs to do. But in a country like us, the state is given the responsibility for implementation.
To implement.
And that they have taken phase by phase. In Karnataka, we are at this, not the last, the next one will be real in terms of going into the 21 disabilities to be making it inclusive. We are at that midpoint where now we are looking at teachers and the resource that can support this issue.
Okay.
Is that okay, Ravi? Is that fine?
Yes, that's
okay.
Is there time for one small doubt?
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
As long as it's exciting.
Is there, no, just for information, I just want to know. Is there any state that has implemented this? And I'm sure Kerala has not. Like to have a teacher. Is there any state which has?
There is actually. Yeah, actually, there is a scale at which the entire country is reporting on the, UNCRPD and the CRC. So the all Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan reports are what they are relying on, which also from our grassroots experience we know is a little exaggerated or inflated. But for state parties to showcase how they have actually performed on this parameter, I think Tamil Nadu has a good track record and it is vetted, isn't it, Ravi? Tamil Nadu is what we also look up to for change. Second comes Goa. Goa in a whole lot of measures have managed to do it. Then I think Delhi is now in the race to really get this enforced. With the new the government in the last 2 terms. So Delhi is actually topping the list right now. And Kerala also comes in the first 5 or 6. Kerala has done well. Yes. Kerala has done very well. See, these are also smaller states except for Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, it was more because of the Jayalalitha government. There were a lot of discussions around it where she clearly had a mandate on this and enabled it. Now I don't know if they're slipping out, but those things were all in place. And the other trend we'll notice is the small states have been able to do it, primarily because our numbers might be less. Yeah. So it's interesting actually. These studies are very interesting. Anything else?
Anyone else?
Hello.
Is somebody speaking up?
Namita.
Ravi sir, I think you mentioned about that if a nation take a policy against this child rights, it will be null and void, right? So what will be the process taken by UNCRC or UNCRPD? What will be the process taken by them against this policy?
No, actually it cannot be null and void. It cannot be null and void. No, I never said that. But what will happen is internationally, we have also signed it. When we sign the UNCRC or when we sign the UNCRPD, we are telling it internationally. We are declaring internationally that we will make our laws in alignment with this UNCRPD, UNCRC, the International Convention. Now, as a sovereign republic, as a country, we can, we need not make any rules or something like that. That is also possible. But when we have declared, as per the UN mandate, that we are duty bound, we publicly declare, when we sign a convention, we declare it that we will, in our country, we will ensure that these international norms are also implemented. So as a sovereign country, we cannot, no other country can come and question us. Uh, but, so India will also give a report. We did that, we did this, we did that, we did this. But NGOs, Fourth Way Foundation, or some other NGOs, they can also give something known as a shadow report. Because they will say that, we have done child labor, eliminated child labor. We have done all this, we have done all that. Or for persons with disabilities, we give them all this. The government will give their own report. Okay. But as a counter, as a person, as an organization who's working in the sector, we as individuals or as a group of people or as an individuals, organizations, we can also give a counter report, which will also be placed in the UN World Body. That then it will also be based. Then the world community, because basically they can also question. America can also ask. I'm sorry, whoever is a signatory to the UN, this one, they'll also say, but what about this government report? What is this counter report? They can also question at that world level. But as a system per se, this is what is being followed. The government of India will also give us report, but you find that that is violative of the international agreement. As an individual, as an organization, you can also give counter reports to the UN, and that can also be brought at that can also be raised at that international fora. But that depends on how much you've got the resource and the bandwidth to make a noise at that appropriate forum. That is what. If you want, you got lots of power and you got lots of bandwidth. You can also go and give a counter report. Yes, please.
I just want to comment something. Namita?
Yes, yes.
Wonderfully framed, grammatically correct English question. Very good. Very good. All of this, and you're not afraid. So one of the challenges, Ravi, is the team at Venda is actually working towards their English proficiency and speaking and all that.
Actually,
so it's very nice to hear Namita shoot.
Dinah. Even then, we should also have something similar even in Karnataka.
We should do that. We'll try. Yeah, we should.
Because at least because here even our teachers and our volunteers are also.
But there's a big difference, Ravi. A state like Kerala, they all learn English. They're just very shy to speak.
Even in Karnataka, even our Karnataka teachers, all of them.
You'll be surprised at the grammar they have, but they don't speak up. It's very strange. It's very strange. So yeah, we should work it out across the board.
Because our teachers are also B.Ed, they have done B.Ed. All of them are B.A. and all.
Our teachers are also learning English, Ravi. They are also doing with stories.
That is what I'm telling. That's what
I just want to. Thank you so much. I just want to also, Namita, the question I'll just finalize. There are countries that are not signatories, Namita. And
USA, one of them.
Exactly. And in specific for Venda, if I were to say the latest country that signed on the UNODC, you all know, no? We had a question in the office. You know who was the last signatory to the UNODC? The UN, actually.
US, no?
Huh?
The last country that became part of the UN.
Some African country or
somebody got prize also. Who got prize?
Somebody answered and got a prize. Okay, I'll just say. So it's Sudan. It's basically the country of Sudan. Okay, that's the latest signatory on the UN. So what happens is countries like that, where there is civil war, civil unrest, for them, these mandates don't, that's not primary for them in terms of enforcing, the UNCRPD or the Convention of the Children, because they're all war torn like that. There are a lot of complexities. So two ways it works, Namita. One is if they are not signatory, countries who are around that. So if we were to take the situation of Sri Lanka, if Sri Lanka is not a signatory or a party to this convention, countries around them can actually put pressure on that country to become a signatory, because like we're now saying, migrants will come in, a whole lot of cross-border impact can happen. So there are countries who will put pressure now for drugs. If Sri Lanka is becoming a hub, then actually India can put pressure on the UN to get Sri Lanka to come on board and sign the convention. So then they follow at least some basic standardization norms to control it in the country. So things like that can happen. Null and void is very clearly for countries who declare that it is against their cultural or religious, but it's a very rare occurrence, because it's very what is enshrined in all of this is very child-centric, and it doesn't hamper any religious sentiments. So I hope we can actually, if your question comes in another level, there are other answers to it, but simply to just give you an answer, countries who don't sign can be pressurized by the neighboring nations or countries who think that there is an impact of that country on certain situations to sign this and abide. Why are we signatories? We have to abide. And okay, the other thing that I wanted to say is, where is this coming from? Why are countries signing up for all of this? Why are we doing it? Is it because there is a UN body? The answer is that we all have signed up for a sustainable development goals. You all are aware of SDGs. Vanda must be very clear about SDGs by now. And it is, as we are working towards sustainable, there are 17 or 18 goals, I think. So 17, if you go through that, 17, you will clearly understand one of the mandates is the rights of the child.
It was signed during the Earth Summit, no? Rio de Janeiro.
Yes, that is environmental convention. So why are we all doing it? So as one what do you say, one human race, we are all ensuring that none of us are left behind, and we voice for the people who cannot voice for themselves. So the Sustainable Development Goals is a unified effort by the human race to ensure that the planet is safe. We conserve our energies. We take care of our women and children, who are half the population in the entire globe. Women are half the population of the entire globe. So if you leave them behind, then you're jeopardizing the future of the race itself. So that the SDGs are basically that. And one of those conventions is the right to child, safety of the child. Manslaya?
Just one more, since you brought it up, I just need to know this. SDG, where did it begin? Was it the Brundtland Commission or the Earth Summit?
Earth Summit is only for the environmental.
No, Earth Summit is for the whole thing. It is for poverty and for.
That is the UNGAS. We are talking about UNGAS, United Nations General Assembly.
That is Rio de Janeiro in 92.
Exactly. 92.
Yeah.
92.
So
it's
that was
nearly 2 decades old.
Yeah, but was the SDG formulated before that? That was in the Brundtland Commission?
No, there are 3 versions of it. So the first draft, I think, comes before the Brundtland Commission.
Okay.
The first draft, I think, comes before that. We can check it out, and we can actually put it up here for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, I think it will be good to go.
Well, actually,
the final document was signed in New York in 2015.
The latest version.
Latest version, yes.
Okay.
While before that we had the MDG, Millennium Development Goals.
Yes.
We had the Millennium Development Goals. After that, 2015, because we felt that these goals, Millennium, we have to carry further. So that is what the SDGs came into play. It was actually Millennium Development Goals.
Correct.
Which was supposed to end by 2000.
2000, and now that's what I'm saying. The last 20 years.
20 years, it's been,
2 decades. 2 decades.
Also, the last country is South Sudan, not Sudan, South Sudan.
Yeah, South Sudan. That's another country, actually. Yeah.
Dinah, I don't know if did US sign the UNODC? Is there anything that something
Yes.
you were telling me? They have not signed or they have signed?
No, they are a big party to it because it's a big problem in their country. So they are one of the leading nations on the UNODC debates.
Okay.
While they haven't signed a lot of other things, this is mandatory for them because it's a big issue.
They were against. Was it pro-liberalization that you said that UN is not? Yeah, they are pro.
Yeah, they are pro. Okay.
Okay.
We done?
Yeah, we should wind up.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for this time. When I introduced him, I forgot to tell one thing. I've always seen Ravi very cheerful. No, not many people are always cheerful. So Ravi has been always cheerful through this journey and all the interactions. So thank you, Ravi, for taking the time out.
This will also be uploaded in the...
Yes, we will. Yes. So thank you, Team Vanda, and thank you, Team Nanagushale, also for joining. You can see all of them here. So have a great day, and thank you, and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.